Hello and welcome to Trails Worth Hiking, the show that brings you some of the most interesting backpacking and trekking routes in the world. I'm your host, Jeremy Pendry. In the first part of the show, we bring you the story and history of a trail. Then we tell you what it's like to hike the trail and how you can do it. On this episode, we have a special episode for you where we'll see two very different ways to design a hike in the exact same area. As we head into the wilderness for an adventure that stays close to home, but is every bit as adventurous as a trip halfway around the world. On this episode of Trails Worth Hiking, we visit Marin County, just north across the Golden Gate Bridge from San Francisco, to learn how you too can design a wilderness adventure close to home. Hello and welcome to the show. Thank you for joining me. More than 20 years ago, when I moved back to the San Francisco Bay Area, I began looking for local hiking opportunities. And I learned that there was a trail in development called the Bay Area Ridge Trail that would eventually circle the entire Bay Area. In fact, today they're getting closer and closer to finishing it, and they're applying for National Scenic Trail status. So that could happen soon. In any event, I started day hiking parts of it all over the Bay Area when I moved back here. But as I looked on the map, it occurred to me that there were some sections that could be done as a backpacking trip. One section in particular was in Golden Gate National Recreation Area, just north of the Golden Gate Bridge, which connects San Francisco to Marin County. But I, of course, was always chasing distant opportunities in exotic places like the Alps or Nepal or Ecuador, all of which were wonderful places to go hiking. And for a long time, I never got around to the adventure that was so close to where I live, until last year. In April 2025, I hiked for 3 days from the Golden Gate Bridge to Olima, which is a small town right next to Point Reyes National Seashore. The hike totaled about 34 miles and was full of adventure on par with anything I could have found anywhere in scenery, wildlife, solitude, and in the people I met along the way. So I was very excited that I had finally done the hike that I thought about for so long. But then I learned that Janna and Grant Glaze, listeners of the show, along with their toddler son Summit, had also hiked in the same area, but had hiked a completely different route. And instead of camping, they had stayed in B&Bs and hotels. They live in San Francisco. I live in the East Bay, east of San Francisco. So for both of us, this was essentially finding wilderness in our own backyard and designing a way to experience that wilderness that worked for us, even though we had completely different kinds of experiences. So on this episode, here's what I plan to do. First, I'll tell you about the trip I planned and how it went. Then we'll talk to Janna and Grant about their trip. Finally, we'll circle back and talk about some of the takeaways from these two trips, and think about considerations for how you might plan a wilderness adventure close to home too. But first, let's do our Walking the Walk segment, where we mention listeners who have hiked a trail after listening to an episode about it. So on this Walking the Walk segment, I'm going to mention Steph Watts, who you're familiar with because she was our guest on the previous episode about the Lara Pinta Trail in Australia. But Steph is also someone who walked the walk after hearing episode 17 about the Overland Track in Australia, in Tasmania, actually. She was inspired to head out and experience the trail over Christmas this past year. She started on the Overland Track, but then they added a 4-day side quest over the Duquesne Range Traverse, which she said was just spectacular. They spent 11 days on trail in total, and there was an unseasonably cold summer, resulting in 9 days of snow, and a white Christmas, which is unheard of in Australia. The Duquesne Range Traverse is off-trail, and it's a highly difficult route, but really added a sense of adventure to the traditional Overland Track experience. Steph actually also listened to episode 5 to learn about the California Riding and Hiking Trail in Joshua Tree. She didn't do that whole trail, but she did head out to California last September, I think it was. And she did some hiking in Joshua Tree and found the episode helpful. And finally, she's now planning a hike on the Kepler Track, which she hasn't done yet, but that's another adventure that we covered on the show. So Thanks to Steph Watts for telling us about her adventure on the Overland Track and for walking the walk, and for checking out Joshua Tree as well and listening to episode 5. So if you'd like to check out either one of those two adventures, you can check out episode 5 for the California Riding and Hiking Trail in Joshua Tree National Park in California, or episode 17 to hear about the Overland Track. And I hope to hear about her Kepler Track adventure after she does it. All right, so that's our Walking the Walk segment. I'd like to also mention that you should definitely buy your backpacking meals from Outdoor Herbivore right now, because April 2026 is the last time for a while we're going to have the 10% discount code. So that's TWH10P, TWH10P, or Trails Worth Hiking 10%, to get 10% off your order on high-quality backpacking meals that are vegetarian or vegan, though, as I always say, you'll love them no matter what your diet is. And they use high-quality ingredients, they have delicious meals, they are packaged in a way that makes them easy to carry, and they're easy to prepare by adding hot water and sealing them for 10 minutes, and then your dinner is ready. So check out Outdoor Herbivore at outdoorherbivore.com. They also have breakfast. They also have cold soak lunches you might like, or cold soak meals that you could use as dinners as well. That's Outdoor Herbivore at outdoorherbivore.com. The discount code will be good through the end of April 2026, and then we'll be running some different special codes for particular items for a while. But this is the last time that we're going to have the general code for at least several months. So if you want to get a big order of Outdoor Herbivore backpacking meals as you get ready for the upcoming summer hiking season, check out Outdoor Herbivore. Thanks again to Outdoor Herbivore for sponsoring the show. All right, now let's talk about my trip. I planned this as a backpacking trip, meaning that I was going to camp rather than stay in inns or hostels or hotels. My goal was to see if I could do a local trip purely as a backpacking trip. I planned the trip for 3 days. And again, as I mentioned, I was going to be following the Bay Area Ridge Trail and going essentially toward Point Reyes. When I originally planned the trip, I considered adding another day on either end. There is a campground in the Presidio in San Francisco itself that I could have reserved, but it's a group site, so it didn't make sense for me to reserve it by myself, really. Also, on the other end, I could have stayed in Samuel P. Taylor State Park, where there's a campground, and hiked one more day on the north end of the hike, which I had originally planned to do, but then I had an obligation that came up during the week of the trip, so I just kept it to 3 days total. Okay, so then I had to decide where to camp. There were some options. One problem I faced is that the options for camping are not evenly spaced, so it would have shorter days and longer days. There are 2 backcountry camps close to the Golden Gate Bridge in the Golden Gate National Recreation Area. I decided to stay at Hawk Camp the first night, which is about 4 miles from the bridge. Originally, I had considered hiking all the way to Panthole Campground in Mount Tamalpais State Park the first night, but that would have been about 16 miles the first day, and that would have been difficult because I was only going to have about half a day the first day because I had to drop my car off at the other end and set up the car shuttle and get back to the Golden Gate Bridge. So I wasn't going to have a lot of time to hike that far. Ultimately, I decided to stay at Panthole the second night, which was 12 miles from Hawk Camp. That left me 18 miles the third day to make it back to my car. If I had camped that night too, it would have been another mile or two to get to the campground, plus additional mileage the next day to get to a convenient spot to park. I think it would have been around 11 miles more of hiking. But as I said, I only had 3 days, so I decided to park along Sir Francis Drake Boulevard near Olema. Then I had to figure out how to get from Olema back to the Golden Gate Bridge to start the hike. Looking online, I found a bus that could take me to San Rafael, back near Highway 101, the main freeway heading toward the Golden Gate Bridge. So I drove from home that morning, it's about an hour away from my house, with the intention of taking the bus. But then once I parked my car, I couldn't find the bus stop. So I went into a local deli to ask about it, and that's when I met Keegan Olton, who is an artist that does some pretty cool large-scale installation art. I'll put a link to his website in the show notes. It's really interesting stuff, and you might want to check it out. Anyway, he came up to me when I was in the deli and trying to figure out where the bus stop was and asking the employees there, and he said he could give me a ride. And that's when I got a ride in a Cybertruck for the first and only time I've been in a Cybertruck, which was pretty cool. Keegan got it on sale when Tesla was having trouble selling them, and he had only had it for a week when I met him. It had the full self-driving package, so the car drove us. But after I got in the car, I realized that he was going to Petaluma, not San Rafael. Petaluma is farther north on 101, so it was still along the main freeway, but a longer drive to the Golden Gate Bridge. But fate had put us together, and we were having a good conversation while the car was driving us to Petaluma, so I just enjoyed the ride. Keep in mind, I hadn't even gotten close to the trailhead, but I was already getting a full dose of adventure. I was essentially hitchhiking with a stranger in a self-driving Cybertruck. Anyway, from Petaluma, I took an Uber to the trailhead, and I started hiking on the trail. The April weather was terrible. There was heavy, dripping fog and wind, but that's the coast in the Bay Area in spring. Hawk Camp doesn't have water, so I had loaded up on water to bring in for the night, but the walk was only 4 miles, so that wasn't so bad. Hawk Camp has 3 campsites. Later, after I was there for a while, one solo woman hiker showed up, but due to the weather, we were each hunkered down in our tents a lot of the afternoon, and we didn't talk much. The next day, I hiked the 12 miles to Pantole Campground in Mount Tamalpais State Park. This was familiar territory, much of which I had hiked before, including going through the edge of Muir Woods, which is an old-growth redwood forest that is a national monument. I also saw a group of Buddhist monks hiking in their crimson and saffron-colored robes. Anyway, I got to Pantole Campground. It's in a beautiful spot up in the forest, but it was also cold and wet. It's a walk-in car campground, meaning there's a parking lot and you walk into the sites. But they also have one site reserved for backpackers only, and that site only cost $7, so I took that site. And I bought a bundle of firewood from the ranger on duty and got a fire going to keep warm. There I met an interesting guy from Los Angeles working his way up the coast on a driving trip, and he was stopped there to camp for the night. He had actually lived recently in Altadena, near Los Angeles, in an in-law unit, or an ADU, as they're calling them now. But the unit, along with the main house, had burned down in the Altadena fire in January 2025, which was unfortunate and had displaced him and his girlfriend. And he was on a trip as they were trying to figure out what was going to come next. So that was day 2, and my evening went fine at the campground there. I knew the third day was going to be hard, so I got up early and started hiking. I saw 2 coyotes even before I got packed. They were walking through the campground as I was putting away my gear. Anyway, I had 18 miles to go. The first part was open oak savanna overlooking the Pacific Ocean with just stunning views. Later, I saw another coyote who just watched me from a spot where it was resting in the grass. I posted pictures of this one on the Instagram account shortly after the hike. Then the hike follows Bolinas Ridge, which is high up along a ridge above the ocean, but for most of it you can't even see the ocean because you're deep in lush redwood forest. For a long time I didn't see anyone until eventually some mountain bikers came by. Then as I got closer to Olima, the forest ended and the rest was cattle ranching grasslands. After an 18-mile day and 34 miles total over 3 days, I made it home for dinner. I had accomplished what I set out to do. I had hiked essentially from the Golden Gate Bridge to Point Reyes National Seashore, which is just west of Olima. Grant and Janna Glaze also hiked in this area, in particular the area I hiked over the first 2 days of my hike. But they did it very differently and stayed in local inns and hotels rather than camping, in part because they were hiking with their then 1-year-old son, Summit. So now we'll listen to my conversation with them about their hike, and then I'll come back and talk about some takeaways and thoughts about how you can plan a local wilderness adventure too. Before we do that though, a quick reminder to become a member of Trails Worth Hiking on buymeacoffee.com/trailsworthhiking. It's only $3 a month or $30 a year to support the show. If you value the content that I'm putting out, please consider becoming a member. In addition, I'd like to thank new members Miriam Metzner, Louise, and Gary. If you've become a member and I haven't thanked you yet, I will do so on an upcoming episode. Also, when you become a member, please put in your name in the way that you'd like me to thank you in the place where it asks for your name. It makes it a little bit easier for me to figure out what to say. All right, with that, let's go on to the conversation with Janna and Grant Glaze. Grant and Janna Glaze, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having
Hi,
us.
yeah, we're excited to be here today.
So, we're going to be talking about this inn to inn hike you guys did in Marin County, just north of the Golden Gate Bridge. Tell me how you were inspired to even decide to try to do that.
Yeah, sure. So we live in San Francisco, California, and but we have traveled all over the world. And once we discovered the hot to hot style, the European style, we loved it, and we always trying to do that. And especially now that we have a 1.5 year old, his name is Summit. Well, it's easy. Things get a little bit even more complicated. But then, so it's always so nice to, after you hike for a really long time, sometimes the weather is not your best friend. It's so nice to come to a place that it offers you a nice dinner, that you have a warm bed, that you can get to enjoy this with other people with a similar mindset as you have. And then in the morning, you can just get up and go. So we were really sad every time that we were trying to look for something local, that we have to literally travel to the other side of the world or the other side of the country to be able to experience something like this. So then I started looking and trying to put things together, and I'm like, well, how can we make it happen? And then I created a rough plan, and then I shared it with Grant.
Yeah.
Okay, Grant. So, once you got this plan and you heard about this idea, what'd you do from there to plan the actual accommodations and the mileage and that sort of thing?
Right. Well, we had a couple criteria that helped make the plan take shape. We knew we were going to do it on Memorial Day weekend, so we knew how many days we had to go from. We knew we wanted to end at the Golden Gate Bridge, and we live in San Francisco, so we knew we wanted to end there, and it'd be a one-way hike. So we kind of worked backwards from there, and we looked at how long we would want to hike in one day, and it's about 8 to 10 miles is I think what we decided upon. And then just work backwards. Okay, we have 4 days, and that's 8 to 10 miles a day, and we want to end in San Francisco. So that got us to start at Muir Woods, and then start to get more and the more details from that point on.
Yeah, we used old trails to be able to kind of like map the details. At first, it was kind of like this rough idea, just a piece of paper. This is where we want to do it. And then Grant, as a good engineer that he is, he's like, let's map things out, detail mile by mile. How are we going to be able to do it? And put it into a topographic map. And especially with Summit, one of the things that we used to do, like we have been together for over 10 years, and so we both were hikers before we met. And then after we met, we started hiking together. Sometimes depending on the day, if you are doing like multi-day or if you are doing a summit, you just get up and then you just go. We used to get up like, oh, let's wake up at 2 a.m. and let's go and climb Mount Whitney. And then during that process, you're like, oh, we're hungry, but we don't want to stop. Let's grab
a bar and keep pushing.
Yeah.
Kind of rough it.
But on a trip like this, you've got a 1.5-year-old going with you. So
Yeah,
you can't do that. You can't rough off. And you don't want to, honestly. You don't want to. You want Summit to be able to experience the trail. You want Summit to be able to enjoy and like things. So, and he was just barely one when we did it. He's still drinking bottles. He's only having food from like baby food, and then you still have to do diaper changes. So you have to stop very often to be able to accommodate for all of these things.
Yeah, the pace slowed down with considering we had a 1-year-old on our backs. And so, some of it was stopping periodically to let him stretch his legs and walk around, because we don't want him to fall asleep in the backpack while we hike. We actually made that mistake early on. We thought we were doing good. He's asleep. We're hiking, no problem. But then when we get to the end of the day, he's ready to party and we're ready to pass out.
Yeah.
Taking little stops and having him stretch his legs and walk a little bit is much better. And another tip to reduce the weight is we shipped ahead little caches of formula for him or snacks for him that would get us by for 1 day's worth. And when we would arrive at the different inns, we would get that new supply, and that would reduce how much we had to pack in the backpacks. His weight was enough. We didn't want any more than that.
Yeah. Were the places understanding what you were doing, and you explained it to them, and they were fine to hold those packages for you?
Yeah, I contacted them beforehand, and then I had already booked the reservation for the three different places that we stayed at, and then I asked them, can I chip something in advance, and they were super understandable. Like they weren't above and beyond accommodating, and actually we needed a crib for Summit. Again, he's just one, and they were
Hmm.
able to accommodate us with all the needs we had.
That's great. And so this is the San Francisco Bay Area. So some people may be shocked by the prices for some of these accommodations, but this is, this is an expensive place to go stay in an
Yeah.
inn very close to San Francisco. Overall, what did something like this cost and how much were the accommodations that you selected?
So the first night we stayed in a hotel that is called the Surf Lodge, and that was close to $400 a night.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then the second night we stayed the Pelican Inn, and that was another like 370 per night, but that one included breakfast.
Okay.
And then last night we stayed at the Holiday Inn, and that was a little bit more affordable, $250 a night just for the rooms. And these are, of course, doesn't include dinner. If you have been to Stinson Beach, you know that that's like a little bit of a high-end town.
Hmm.
So the dinner for both of us were about like $100 to $150.
So a little bit more than the hut to hut in Europe, but also these places are essentially in the town. So it's just like a hotel or something like that. It's not up in the mountain passes.
Right. They're not mountain refuges. These are regular hotels.
Right. Or bed and breakfast. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. With those 3 nights combined, that's actually not horrible for three of you to be able to do a trip like this. I mean, especially considering that you're in Northern California, very
Exactly.
expensive region, and you're on the coast in some beautiful terrain. So, there's a lot of reasons that if you are willing to spend that kind of money, it absolutely could be worth it. And it sounds like for you guys, it made perfect sense.
Yeah, I mean, if you're gonna be spending a weekend here in San Francisco, you easily spend over
Yeah.
$1,000 in
Yes. Yeah.
days, right? Like just the hotels right here outside our house, they run about $400 a night. So
One of the things we're talking about here is how, that you can create a trip close to home. So you didn't have to pay for flights. You didn't have to pay for a lot of gas to drive somewhere for a long time. And so, there are some savings when you do something, even if it's an expensive accommodation. If it's close to home, you're saving in other ways. And overall, you're still getting a fantastic multi-day hiking experience.
yeah,
Right.
totally. And actually, these bed and breakfasts were right on the trail. We left here, we went to Mirror Woods.
Hmm.
We have to figure out how to get there because they don't allow you to leave your car overnight. It's a super popular parking.
Yes.
If you actually go there, you have to make reservations in advance to be able to get there. And with a toddler or with a 1-year-old, you have to have a car seat. So we're like, we can't just ask any friend, hey, give us a ride.
We ended up using Uber. That worked really well. Uber shows up at your door with a car seat installed, and we just put Summit in there, and they brought us all the way to the beginning of the hike.
That's great. I didn't know that was even a service they provided.
That was the first time we tried it, and it worked really well.
Yeah.
And it really wasn't that much more expensive than a normal Uber.
So overall, how did this work out compared to what you planned? Did it go down the way you had hoped?
Yeah, it worked really well.
Really, really well.
As the day went on, we realized the value in starting earlier. It gives us just more time in the day, more stops we can have with Summit to play here and there. But there were no crazy surprises that we didn't plan for.
As you look back on it, is there anything you would have done differently or anything you would advise others to think about if they were doing a trip like this, whether with a young child or even without?
Even though that is not Europe, the reservations are kind of hard to get. In Stinson Beach is like a very limited places where you can stay. There are only like 2 or 3 different places where you can stay. And we were actually, we were waitlisted.
Oh,
Because it was Memorial Day weekend.
right.
They were full and we were waitlisted. And then I was like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do if that spot doesn't open up? They give preference usually to people who book 2 consecutive nights. And then so I ended up calling and trying to confirm, hey, this is what we are doing. Can you please let us know? Because if it doesn't work out, if one night doesn't work out, the entire trip doesn't work out. And also the Pelican Inn, which we haven't really talked about what it is, but is another super popular bed and breakfast, which is super unique.
Hmm.
Yeah, it seems like an old English style hut, and so it's really, really unique, and I think fills up fast. So preparation ahead of time is important.
Okay, so definitely advance reservations if you're in a popular area. Any other advice you'd give to others who, for example, let's say they're in a completely different part of the country, but trying to think of a way to put together a hotel to hotel or inn to inn kind of hike in their region? What are some things that you guys learned from doing this that they might want to think about?
I think in addition to the checking the distance between the different places, using all trails tells you a little bit about the elevation
Hmm.
between, start and finish, which is an important thing to consider because that'll affect how big your day is and how long it'll take you. So it's something to keep in mind that you don't plan something that's maybe the right distance, but really extreme elevation. So All Trails was able to help us put the big picture together.
Yeah, and for me, I would say even though that you are hiking to specific smaller towns, this is still like a hike that is in the back country. Can like it's a fully hike, it's isolated. You are
Hmm.
going through trails, so just treat it like that. You're not gonna stop and have a place where you can buy coffee or
Right.
like you still have to carry some of the basic things for the day, and then 8 miles later is when you arrive. But I think actually I would encourage anyone to try to do something like that and share it, because I think that it's great.
Do you guys think you will do something like this again, where you create your own version of a hut to hut kind of hike or inn to inn?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
I
so.
think
I think so.
so.
We have been looking at other places, kind of like in the middle of the United States, and
Hmm.
yeah, we'll keep you posted once that finalizes.
Cool. So you guys have a YouTube channel. Why don't you tell folks what your YouTube channel is? And I think you do have a video about this hike. That's where I saw some of the information about the different places you stayed. Can you let folks know where they can find more about this?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we do have a YouTube channel. It's called Grant and Janna. We've made little videos of our adventures and hikes starting before we had a son. And it mostly is a way to give back to the community and help show people that some of these trips are really possible and doable. And I think sometimes after we come back from trips, people have questions. Well, how on earth did you do this? And how did you get from here to there? And what was it like? Were you in the middle of nowhere, or what was the food like? And so I think putting all that together helped show people that these things really are doable. And then after we got going, we just kept doing it, and it turns into a way to remember the fun memories as well.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that also now that we have Summit, we trying to keep on doing what we love and also introduce our little one to these kind of activities, and it's very doable. With a little bit more time and just a little bit more planning, things are definitely possible. As you know, we just sent some videos to you after the meetup from trails or hiking and chatting with other people from the same community. We got definitely a lot of encouragement and support to do the Tour de Mont Blanc, which we just completed it. And I think that either if you're single, if you have a very young family like we do, or if you have an older family, these trips have something to offer for absolutely everyone. And really, for this specific trip, even though that it is in our own backyard, you experience such a different terrains and views. When we started brainstorming ideas of how are we gonna call this trip, we decided to call it something like from
The woods
yeah from
to the beach to the bridge.
because
Nice.
you start with the redwoods and then you go to the beach and you end on the iconic San Francisco Golden Gates, and you get a taste of absolutely all of that in 4 days. We even go through this really famous half marathon that it goes through a Stinson Beach.
Hmm.
So the Dipsy.
The double dipsy or the dipsy. Yeah.
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 Yeah, so it was really a lot of fun. We had fun, Summit had fun, and it was a great getaway that we didn't have to travel, or we didn't have to get adjusted to the time change, which usually you have to sacrifice a couple of days for
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And they were able to accommodate all the needs for a 1 year old.
That's fantastic. And that's why I asked you guys to come on, because it's really great to hear that that you were doing something that I had recently been doing as well, which is trying to find great wilderness adventures close to home. And when you don't have a lot of time or you don't want to spend the money to travel or the effort of travel, especially with a young kid, it's great to find something that's right in your own backyard, like you said. It really is real wilderness, and you can still stay in nice accommodations. And that's a great combination. And I think other people can find that close to home wherever they live. And every environment and every part of the country or part of the world is a little different. But I think this is doable in a lot of places and in a lot more places than people realize. And I think that's the message I want people to get from this. Before I let you go, can you give me the rough itinerary of your trip?
Yeah, sure. Day one, like we mentioned, we took an Uber from our hometown, San Francisco, to Mirror Woods, and that took us about like an hour and a half distance. And then so we went from the Mirror Woods Park to Stinson Beach, and that was about 8 miles, and that's where we stayed at the Surf Lodge. And then that's pretty much just really beautiful trails, and you ended up being welcomed by this amazing ocean view. And then the second day we went from Stinson Beach to Mirror Beach, and that was another like 7 miles hike. And we spent the night in the Pelican Inn, which Grant talked about.
And from there, we went Muir Beach to Mill Valley, another 8 miles, staying in the Holiday Inn Express. And the final day was Mill Valley all the way to the Golden Gate Bridge to finish it up.
Yeah. And Summit got to experience that traditional cold, windy weather, foggy weather. It's like this is the first time on the bridge, and you can see the entire nothing.
Yeah. Well, that's because you guys went on Memorial Day weekend, which is it's the June gloom season.
Yeah.
Where you can't really see much in San Francisco. The best time of year is, September, October, right? It's beautiful that time of year.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for telling me about your hike. But while I have you, if you don't mind, I have a few more questions.
Yeah, please.
Sure.
Okay. What is one piece of gear you guys don't leave home without?
Oh, yeah. I'd say the one thing we always bring is a buff, like sun protection buff, just sits around your neck. It's breathable fabric. And so that's been great if you want to use it and need a little blockage from the sun or maybe wind. And especially if you're wearing a ball cap or something, you can pull it up and it'll act like little blinders and block the sun from the sides or the wind. And if you don't want it, you just put it around your neck. So it's really packable, breathable. It comes in handy when you really need it.
Yeah, those are great too, because you can soak them when you come by a creek or something if it's hot out, and then put it back on your neck and cool yourself down.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
We've done that trick as well. It's really great. All purpose.
We love them. Yeah.
What's the one hike or trip you've done besides this one that others shouldn't miss out on?
If we focus on just hot to hot, we don't really have a favorite. I think that everyone has a special one, but Alta Via One.
Okay.
Doing research from Alta Via One is how we heard about your show.
Oh, cool.
And that's how we discover you. So yeah, that was pretty great. And then so Alta Via One, I think.
What about the Alta Via One makes it one of your favorite hut to hut trips? And I'm asking partially because it's a trip that I'm considering doing and I haven't done yet.
Oh, you should
do it.
Do it.
Okay.
Do it.
But what makes it so great? I want to know from you guys, what makes it so great?
Alta Via One and the Dolomites there, it's just beautiful mountains all around you. The food at the different huts is amazing. And the people on the trail we run into just make just this trifecta of wonderful trip.
It's totally spectacular. The views, in our humble opinion, is just like out of this world. It's just that the Dolomites have so much to offer from so many different angles, and you keep on seeing different things over and over again. Like day by day is different. It's different that when you go to do the TMB in Mont Blanc, you're seeing the mount from different angles, but it's kind of like the same terrain versus it is not in Alta Via One. When you go to Patagonia, you see the same kind of glaciers and mounts and weather. But in the Dolomites, it is truly different between day to day. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'm definitely sold on that. I just need to find the time to do it.
Yeah.
Right.
And on the Altas, you don't have to stop on one, right? You can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But we do have other, we talked about Patagonia. So, The W circuit is pretty good. And one here in the States that is a 2-day hike.
Yeah, 2-day hike, 1-night stay is the Minim River Lodge, which is actually in Oregon.
Yeah, you guys mentioned that to me before. That seemed really neat.
Yeah, that was a nice trip. It's shorter, so that's one you can maybe do more in a weekend. It's more local, and it was just a great time.
It's more like literally like a hut where you can only get there by hiking, or if you have the means, you can fly there. But there are no cars. It's about, I think, 20 miles round trip.
Mm-hmm.
It's really like truly European style with the amazing food and pretty trail.
What's the next trip on your list?
Next trip for us would be to go back to the Danube River and do some biking along the Danube River. We already did one section, and we're going to come back, and there's more river, so we're going to do another section, starting in Germany and ending in Austria.
So did you do the Danube last time before you had Summit?
Actually, we did it with Summit.
Oh, okay.
It was just 3 months. But that time, we had a little trailer attached to our bike. And he was in there, and he was all secure, like in his own little car seat, kind of. And just watching the world go by through the the side panels of the trailer. So yeah, he'll come back, and we probably don't need a trailer this time. Maybe he can just be behind one of our seats in a little seat there.
And that was as new parents, that was a great experience. Not only because we had Summit as 3 months old, but because we were learning from other parents that they were doing similar things as what we were doing. We met a French couple that they were doing it. Our trip was about 2 weeks. They were doing it for 3 months. The entire Danube River. She was also doing it during her maternity leave.
Oh, wow.
1.5-year-old, but they were camping.
Nice.
And we were staying in end to end. So the trip, our family was like, "You're crazy. You're about." And we got there, and it's all relative. So
All relative.
Yeah. There's always somebody who's a little crazier than you are.
We don't feel so bad.
And we learned how they were teaching her how to communicate. She wasn't talking either. And they were teaching her about like communicating with sign language, and they were, how they do things. And we're like, right after that trip, we started teaching sign language. We started like modeling how the French people were doing and teaching their kids. And it was just wonderful, a wonderful experience for all of us. And of course, for Baby Summit.
All right. Last question. What's the worst weather you've ever experienced while outdoors, and how did you handle it?
Yeah, I'd say that worst weather probably occurred the first time we did the TMB about
10 years ago.
10 years ago. We started to go up a mountain pass. And before the trip, Janna, this is when I was starting to get into longer distance hiking or multiple day hiking. Janna had done it before, and she said, "You have to have a Gore-Tex jacket." And I was like, "Oh, like a waterproof jacket." I have a waterproof jacket. It says waterproof on the label. And I brought it, and it was not waterproof. So I was getting drenched and just didn't have the right gear. And it started raining as we were going up this pass, and it turned into hail as we were going over the pass, and just torrential rain pouring and the hail coming down. Luckily, we made it through. I kept moving to stay warm, and we went through the next town.
Courmayeur.
Courmayeur, yeah, in Italy. And that's where I was able to buy actually a Gore-Tex jacket. But just getting through that pass was a tough time.
So, I'm going to use a word that we keep on hearing from our friends from the Alps. There is no such a thing as a bad weather. There is just the people who are not prepared with the right gear, right? Because you have to be ready to experience hail, raining, hat, and whatnot.
Yeah, I was thinking that as you were saying your answer, Grant. I was thinking, that's not really about horrible weather. That's about bad preparation and not knowing what your gear is capable of.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, but that's good. That's a learning lesson, and you went and bought some new gear and fixed the problem. And next time, I'm sure we're better prepared. Yep. Well, Janna and Grant Glaze, I really appreciate you coming on the show. Thanks for doing it.
Thanks you. So much. Thank you so much.
Thanks again to Janna and Grant for sharing their story of their local wilderness hike. Now let's look at some big picture thoughts about planning a trip like this. First, start by finding possible local wilderness routes. Be liberal in what you consider wilderness. It can be through farmland or ranch land. It can be through local or state or federal parks. My hike was through all three. Look on Google Maps and put in a walking route and see how you might be able to connect wilderness spaces. If they aren't directly connected, you can find out whether there are trails or dirt roads or even actual roads you could walk to connect them. One thing that made my planning easy was the existence of the trail and development that covers this area, the Bay Area Ridge Trail, which I mentioned. You won't always have an option like that, but there might be other types of trails and routes that you can take advantage of that already exist. Next, look at the accommodations that might help you string several days together. And be creative here. Consider camping opportunities. There might be car campgrounds that maybe even have a backpacker site, or maybe not. But you could still reserve a car campground regular site. There might be backcountry sites like I had. There might be group sites. And you can check the regulations to see if you have to actually be a group or if it's just a higher fee that you pay. Or you can check Hip Camp, which is a great website for camping on private land. It's kind of like Airbnb for camping. You could also consider hostels, inns, and hotels, and see if there's a way to string some days together with any or all of these types of options. You could even consider staying at friends' houses, or Airbnbs might work as well. As I mentioned, I stayed at a backcountry site and a regular car campground that had a hiker site. I could have stayed a third night in a hotel to get a chance to clean up and eat a restaurant meal before keeping going. Or I could have done an all lodge to lodge or hotel to hotel hike like the Glaze family did. Or as I said, maybe if you actually know someone who lives close to the route you're considering, you could do that. I didn't know anyone on this particular route that would have made it that convenient for me. Anyway, so now that you have park and rural spaces to traverse in mind, and you've looked at places to stay, how does that shape your mileage each day? That could make going in one direction versus another make more sense. If things are too close together or far apart, you can adjust. I was stuck with a 4-mile day and an 18-mile day, but I could use the 4-mile day as a partial day to set up my car at the destination trailhead. If I had gone the other direction, it wouldn't have worked. Also, you can use proximity to home as an advantage. You can get dropped off by a family member or a friend at one end so that you can hike to your car at the other end. Or if you have another friend go with you, you can put a car at each end. Again, since you live reasonably close, maybe you know someone you can stay with as well. That makes it easier to set up your hike. Or you could do like I did on my urban adventure in episode 71 and actually figure out a way to go home each night. But in my mind, that takes away from trying to make this an immersive, at least partial wilderness experience, which is a different goal than what I was doing in the urban hike episode. I would also say it's important to consider your personal situation. The Glaze family had their son Summit, so camping out was for them not something they really wanted to do. For me, as a solo hiker, I didn't want to spend a fortune for one person staying in a hotel, so camping made the most sense. Also, think about how you can use the way towns are set up and other civilization wisely. If there aren't rural inns or hostels, maybe your route could take you through towns between park or wilderness spaces, and you could just stay in regular hotels each night in a town. Also, consider how public transportation might integrate with what you're trying to do. Another thing you can do because you're going close to home is to use off days or off season even to do your hike. Because you're local and you don't have to fly to your destination, you can take advantage of the opportunity to go when local parks and wilderness spaces aren't crowded. During the week in April was much easier for me to get camping sites reserved than during a weekend in the summer, for example. Also, I thought it was really great that the Glaze family just thought to pick up the phone and call these places. They got a lot of value by calling so that they could stay one night when normally there was a 2-night minimum. And they were also able to arrange shipping packages ahead to the places they were staying, and even getting a crib set up for their son. Finally, I would say remind yourself that you are on an adventure. Even though you are close to home, once you walk out the door, treat it like any other trip. You are now a traveler. Within barely an hour of being out my door, I was hitchhiking with an interesting guy in a self-driving Cybertruck. A few hours later, I was setting up my tent in cold wind and heavy fog. It was every bit as much an adventure as if I had gone halfway around the world. The Glaze family was staying in an English-style inn with a pub and great food on the coast, Never mind that on a clear day, they could practically see from there where they lived just down the coast. So those are some of my thoughts on creating your own wilderness adventure. And I hope that the Glaze family and I have inspired you to find your own wilderness adventure close to home. And if you enjoyed this episode, tell a friend about it, or better yet, give us a good review on whichever podcast service you use. And keep in mind, this podcast is entertainment and meant to spark your interest. If you decide to hike the routes I've talked about, or any route that you create yourself, do your own research. Like anything else worth doing, outdoor adventure has risk. So when you go, pack your common sense. And when you get back, tell me how it went. Before we go, I want to remind you again about Highlander Big Bear Lake, happening June 23rd to June 27th, 2026 in Big Bear Lake, California. Why not take a trip out to Southern California for the week and have a great backpacking adventure in a community-type setting where you'll be hiking with a group of other hikers, although everybody at their own pace. And you'll have campsites arranged for you ahead of time, a route planned out for you. You only have to carry one day of food at a time. But I think the best thing overall, as I've mentioned before in talking about Highlander, is that you will meet lots of like-minded people who love the outdoors, and you might make some friends that will be people you will hike with in the future. So give Highlander a try. You can use the discount code TWH20, TWH20, to get 20% off your registration for Highlander Big Bear Lake. And if you use the discount code, that will also help the show. So thank you in advance for that. Next time on Trails Worth Hiking, we go back to the UK for another adventure, but this time, instead of walking in the northern part of England or in Scotland like on previous episodes, we'll go to the south of England, the southwest of England, in fact, to the very southwest tip of England for a beautiful and challenging coastal walk on England's longest national trail, where we'll traverse 4 separate counties and see a variety of landscapes, including grasslands, moors, dramatic rocky coasts, and historic fishing and mining regions with distinct cultural identities, and even a coast filled with Jurassic fossils, as we hike more than 600 miles on England's southwest coast path in Somerset, Devon, Cornwall, and Dorset. If you have any questions or feedback on this episode or ideas for future episodes, including if you want to be a guest and talk about a trail that you've hiked, reach out to me at trailsworthhiking@gmail.com. And please follow us on Instagram, of course, at Trails Worth Hiking Podcast. And if you're interested in the random musings of a 50-something dude about retirement, check out my YouTube channel at GoGo Retirement. Links to all of these things in the show notes. All right, so that's it for this episode. So start planning your next hike. And before you know it, you'll be on the trail. Thanks for listening.